Childhood trauma and the effects on the brain from childhood trauma. So in this video, I'm going to be explaining where childhood trauma comes from, the types of stresses that cause childhood trauma, so that you can understand it and so eventually you can release it. Welcome back to another video. I'm Max Hindle I. I help entrepreneurs release childhood trauma so that you can live a powerful life without years of therapy. And before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon to make sure you get notified whenever I post. But other than that, let's get into the video. Childhood trauma, or any trauma in general, comes from an enormous amount of stress initially. So even trauma, like a trauma injury, like trauma to the brain, it's because there's a lot of stress on the brain physically. If there's a lot of stress emotionally, we will also form childhood trauma, or just trauma in general, PTSD. For example, someone that's been in warfare, they can get PTSD because of all the traumatic experiences going around them. And this will cause an emotional connection whenever they hear a firework that goes off. Now, PTSD is a lot deeper than just that. So if you want to understand more about PTSD, click this video up here so that you can really dive deeper into that. I'm not going to explain any more in this video about that specifically. But the fact is, we will produce an emotional connection once something traumatic happens. And trauma is just an emotional connection to a past experience or many past experiences. But matter of fact, we need stress to grow. We need stress to be human. And the greatest study that was done, and this was actually read from Jay Shetty's book, Think Like a Monk, about how there was a biosphere, biodome, that had the perfect conditions for trees to grow. Nutrient-rich soil, purified water, clean air, they had it all. Now, over a period of time, these trees would grow, they would grow, but eventually these trees would get to a certain height, and the scientists kept noticing that these trees would just collapse. And when these trees collapse, they couldn't really work it out. They're saying, everything is perfect. Why are these trees too weak to stand up? And what one of the amazing scientists came to believe was the fact that they didn't account for some of the factors. They didn't account for wind. They didn't account for storms. They didn't account for stress. And you'll understand where I'm getting at if you stay to the end to understand the three types of stress that can be caused. Because when a tree is under stress, the bark grows stronger. The roots dive deeper. They actually connect underground like they're holding hands, and that's really cool. I find that amazing that trees can do that. Do you know what I mean? That is incredible. But they do this under immense stress so that they can be stronger. And it's just the same with humans. When we are faced with stress, we are faced with pain, we begin to grow. And it's kind of like bones. Like when you break a bone, I could be wrong, but this is what I've always been told and I've always known. When you break a bone, that specific place actually grows back stronger. And it's kind of like scar tissue as well. I've had a couple of operations. I've broken many bones myself. But it's kind of like operations where when they cut it, that scar tissue eventually comes back stronger and it's actually harder to break. So this is sort of like analogies for life of like, we actually need to endure the stress. And I've had operations many times. I've had operations once, but I've broken many bones. And when I had the operation, initially I couldn't like put any weight on it. It was down like on my side, like on my hip. And I couldn't put any weight on it because it could split open. But now it's completely strong. The scar's still there, but it's completely strong. And if we don't endure some sort of stress, by default, we are going to be weak. We are not going to be strong enough to be able to contain everything that comes to us in life. And the greatest example I like to live by and like to use is, imagine every single thing went right for you from the day you were born to today. And then all of a sudden, and I'm going with a business aspect because this is where I always use it for myself. Imagine you started a business, went perfectly, first year made $1 million, second year 5 million, third year 10 million. Fourth year, something minor happens. And you lose 5 out of your 10 clients, and let's say it's a huge business that's generating a lot of money, and 90% of your profit is with those 5 clients. What's gonna happen? Extreme stress. if you haven't enjoyed any form of stress, this extreme stress can flip the switch and turn you all the way down, going into that turmoil and really, really, really going down. So we need to endure these little bits of stress here and there. But if stress is triggered repetitively, constantly over time, over years, this is going to cause us pain in adulthood. When we become adults, or we become older in general, or if we just become older from a trauma that has happened recently, if we are enduring this stress repetitively, it's going to be normal for us, and we're not really going to know any differently. So this is what can happen and cause a lot of trauma. So I'm going to explain the 3 types of stress that we can allow ourselves to go through, or that we do go through in everyday life anyway, and how important it is for you to understand this. So first things first, what happens when we're stressed? Our hormones increase. So your cortisol, your adrenaline, and realistically, adrenaline is stress, but adrenaline can be used for pleasure as well. For example, someone can jump out of a plane and see extreme stress, fear, panic, pain, run, don't do it. Whereas someone else can see it as fun, enjoyable, exhilarating. They're really allowing them to tap into their own stress response and essentially control it and master it. But what actually happens? Your blood flow pumps faster, your heart rate increases. So again, it can be a positive or a negative reaction, but these are the types of positive stress. And it's how we perceive the stress is what we're going to take from it. For example, someone public speaking, again, can feel perfectly calm. Someone else can feel extreme stress. They're having the exact same reactions. They're sweating, they're maybe going red because one's excited, the other one's just stressed. But positive stress is what helps you grow. And the greatest example I can give from a childhood is imagining when you're going down that slide when you're young. And I can think of a time when I used to race motorbikes. There was this hill that, I kid you not, was literally like that. You couldn't walk up it. It was that steep. So the first time going over, started the race, getting around to that corner was crap. Like, I can't stop here. I just can't stop. I have to go down. And of course, that causes tension, stress. Eventually, after doing enough laps, I began to get used to it. But the first time of going down, that was extreme stress. It was panic. And I wasn't looking forward to it. But once I did it once, and the second time, it became easier. And it's like when you're a child and you go down that slide, you see that huge slide that just, when you're a child, everything seems 10 times bigger. And you're like, that is scary. That is scary. You get up the top, you start crying, you start panicking, you start not wanting to do it. Then you go down it and you realize it was actually really fun. So you do it again and you're not as scared. You do it again and you're not as scared. Eventually you conquer the slide, essentially. And that's a metaphor we can use for life. The more we do something, the more we begin to conquer it. And what happens is your stress response begins to respond normally, just like it's part of every day. Initially, stress, but now no stress. Why? Because you've mastered the slide. You've mastered, or you've gained competence and confidence that you can do it. So the second type is called tolerable stress. Now, tolerable stress really is losing friends, losing family, or even natural disasters that can happen. And yes, this can cause issues in your adult life. Support, if you haven't got a support network, if you haven't got the right equipment, want for a better word, the right people, the right knowledge, the right information that you're consuming, therapists, people to speak to, coaches, whatever it is. If you haven't got the right support network, then it's going to be a struggle, but it's still possible, because not everyone develops trauma, childhood trauma, PTSD, but people can, and about 70% of people can, especially from traumatic experiences. And what this does is it gives you that bark on the tree, essentially. When you get the information, you have the knowledge, you have the information, and you have an emotional connection to it, but you take the emotion out, you actually take wisdom from that situation. And when you take wisdom, you can use that later in your life. For example, one of the reasons I feel like I'm very open about speaking about the stuff I speak about is because I've experienced a lot of what I speak about. And down to trauma, down to anxiety, down to depression, all those things. And I wasn't as depressed as some people, and I completely understand that. But I was in a very, very, very bad place. But my anxiety was very, very high. Traumas, I've been through a lot of traumas, physical, mental, and emotional. And that's why I like to speak up about this stuff, because I need to help people. And you watching this video, you're here to help yourself. So Thank you. It's got to be done, and hopefully this can spark you to maybe help people as well, and hopefully I can make a domino effect. That's a goal. That's a big goal of mine. But the third and final and painful stress is called toxic stress. And what is toxic stress? This can be down to abuse, absence, bullying, like absence from your family, like being neglected, all these type of things like that will really, that most people would think of as childhood trauma, sexual assault, sexual abuse, all that kind of stuff. It's sort of all umbrellas, like the things that most people would assume trauma to be. Now, as I said, all these other things, they are trauma, and even being laughed at can be classed as trauma. But the things that people would assume to be trauma tend to be toxic trauma. So they're like the worst case. But again, I don't really like to put a label on what's worse trauma than others, because it's how we perceive it at the end of the day. Some people can go through something that may seem much worse, but they can deal with it much better. And that's just dependent on the individual. And toxic stress literally causes complete changes in the brain. It can get us to that point of feeling like we don't deserve it, we are worthless, we are useless. We've been told repetitively over years upon years upon years upon years, and some may see this as CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or just complex trauma. But this is where we truly feel, and it becomes a program in our subconscious mind. And if you watch any of the videos about me explaining how the subconscious mind works, you know what to do, click up there if you want to understand it. You will understand that 95% of our life is run through the subconscious. So if our programs 95% of the time say, I'm worthless, I'm useless, I'm nothing, I'm never going to amount to anything, I'm this, I'm that, all negative, what do you think is going to come in your life? Do you think anything positive is going to come? And this is what can really cause anxiety, trauma, depression, childhood trauma, PTSD, CPTSD, all these type of these umbrella mental health issues that come under this can be caused from, as I just said, the more complex things of like over periods of time, or bullying, or being neglected, or being abused, all these types of things. That's what it can cause, which has long-term effects on our mind, on our brain especially. So there's a part of our brain called the amygdala, and this is known as the fear center or the emotional center in the brain. Although it does perform multiple other functions, what it mainly does is detect the fear, detect external circumstances to see, is there anything that's going on that could put me in danger right now? And obviously in today's day, if we are feeling anxious, going out the house could be seen as fear in our minds. Now, not necessarily is that going to be real fear, but the fear is within us. So I'm saying the fear is real within us, but logically speaking, is going to the shop's going to cause us real fear? And the answer and the reason is because, as I said, the pre-programming for years upon years is to say, be scared, be worried, be scared, be worried, be scared, be worried. And if this is done over a period of time, multiple times, and if you do it every day, and there's many other things that are going on right now that are causing a lot of fear. So if you are listening to things and you are being programmed into fear, you're always going to be in that state of survival. And when you're in that state of survival, you cannot create anything that you want in your life, because it is run, fight, or hide. And that's where you move into the fight or flight response. And you don't allow yourself to move into your own power. And when I say move into your own power, I mean taking back your confidence, your happiness, your self-love, all these kind of things that you deserve, because you're constantly in that state of fear, fight, or flight. So being open to all this fear all the time, being told that you have to be scared, that you have to be worried, that everything could go wrong. Of course your brain is going to change. Of course your brain is going to take in the information and say, what, that was safe, and this is the neurological connection. That was safe, that's no longer safe. And it makes a whole different connection, which says, okay, that is no longer safe. And again, this is not a scientific representation, but what once was safe is no longer safe. So that puts you in even more stress, which again changes the brain, which again has long-term effects on your brain. And if there is constant stress, as I said, you will constantly be in the fight or flight response. You will be in fear. So one of the main things is really to allow yourself to move away from what is the fear, what is causing you this fear. And I always say, don't let our external circumstances dictate us, but we still do need to move away from what is negative, what is causing us fear, what is causing us trauma, and allow ourselves to move on and grow in our life. because otherwise your brain is going to be constantly filled with these hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, and obviously if you're in that anxiety feeling, then it's not going to be that good adrenaline. It's going to be the adrenaline that causes fear, that causes stress, that causes even worse outcomes. And then we start thinking, what if this, what if that, what if this, what if that? And again, the long-term effects on the brain are going to be programs. And programs is just a fancy word for a belief, I suppose. Programs that play out for you to live this way now. So if you install your mind with something more powerful, then your programs are eventually going to change. I personally use hypnosis to do it much quicker, but you can do it over a period of years just by listening to positive material, just by reading the books. You can do that. It just takes a little longer. So that's why I do hypnosis, because I can do that in a matter of weeks. And if you want to release any of your childhood traumas, your fears, your past, then send me a message or head over to my website so that we can schedule in a subconscious mind analysis, a free 30-minute call that will allow you to understand where you are, where you want to be, and how I can be that bridge to help you get there. At the end of the day, if you allow your brain to constantly be changed by this stress, things are going to just go downhill from there. So we've got to take back our power, which you have. I never put power inside anyone when I hypnotize them, when I take them through my courses. I bring out the power that's already there. It's already within you. It's just about bringing it out, understanding it, befriending it, and growing together with it. Namaste. So with that being said, I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Keep spreading love, kindness, and so much positivity. Yeah.